Hi, and welcome to episode 1 of the Happier Active podcast. My name's Ellie, I'm the host. Today we have Maria Rigo from Boundless Balance. I've chosen this episode first because I think it's a really great conversation about a kind of introduction to health coaching and some good discussion around things that you can do to just get started on a health journey. So that's why I kind of thought it was a good one to start with. Maria's really great, very passionate, and clearly very knowledgeable. So it's a really great conversation. I can't wait for you to hear it. Hello, and welcome to the Happier Active podcast. There's lots of ways to find your path to better health and happiness, and what works for each person is very individualised. And my philosophy is that most people are more likely to find that if they're active participants in their health journey. So this is a space to start exploring some of the rich and varied areas which people practice, and you can start thinking about what resonates with you and discover new or different practices to either start or deepen your health journey. And today I have Maria Rigo from Boundless Balance. Hi.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome.
I
know you're struggling a bit with your voice today.
Yeah, I'm getting over a cold, so it's always fun to have a health coach who's sick, right?
It's the time of year for it. So why don't you tell us a bit about what you do?
So I've been in the health and fitness industry for almost 25 years. I started out as a personal trainer. So I have this love of biomechanics, of helping people really nail their form, make sure they're in good alignment. I was a Pilates instructor. I'm a Melt Method instructor, so I teach people about their fascia, their neurofascial network. And I became a health coach because I realized that you could train somebody on Monday and they're all excited, they had a great workout, but when they come to see you next Monday, they're like, oh, I didn't do my homework, oh, I fell off, I ate this, I did that. And I realized there's definitely a need for personal trainers, but I wanted to be able to give people the support that they needed so that they could achieve the goals they wanted to achieve. And I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is an autoimmune disorder, after my second son was born in my late 20s. And I've been living with Hashimoto's for 30 years. And I've also found that I've gone through menopause, so I feel like I really have this understanding of dealing with autoimmune issues, dealing with menopausal symptoms, but it all comes back to just getting our bodies, our cells, as happy as we possibly can, and that will support no matter what's going on in our life.
Yeah, that really resonates with me. Was a personal trainer as well, and I've become a health coach, and it's similar. I found that a lot of the women that I was working with, it's a holistic thing, right? So if they weren't hitting their goals, it was often nothing to do with what they were doing in the gym or outside, because they were so stressed, their gut health was all over the place, or they were not able to sleep well, or they were always in their fight or flight, and so then they're not, and it's the whole, you sort of need to look at everything to really move forward often.
Absolutely. And one area affects one area, and then that area affects that same area. So if you're not sleeping well, but you're trying to lose weight and you can't sleep, but your diet is messed up and you're stressed out, you're going to keep this cycle, right? So you're going to eat food that's, maybe sugar is going to really do a number on your gut. It's going to affect your nervous system. Your sleep's going to be off, and that cycle keeps perpetuating. And so the more we can help people kind of find the simple things that, to us maybe like, oh, well, that was a no-brainer. But to other people, we hear in the media, we read, we hear, oh, do this workout, eat this food, do this diet. And sometimes it's so much simpler, but so much deeper per person. Everybody's so different, right?
Yeah, and I think it's actually something that I talked to someone this morning a bit as well about those like red flags for when someone's saying to you, oh, this thing works for everyone. It's like a one-size-fits-all approach. And then when people have tried those, and that happens in the diet industry a lot, and then they feel like if it's not worked for them, it's their fault, and that feeds into that sort of negative cycle. And actually helping people understand there isn't really a one-size-fits-all approach, because
No.
it's got to work with your life and your body. And like me and my husband like to eat quite differently, but we try and have like the same protein, and then we'll both make our own different things to go with it. So we're still trying to have that togetherness, but it took us a long time to figure that out because we both want to eat quite differently, but we still want to eat together. And I think there's a lot of that, of trying to help people find those little ways in that they can start making like smaller changes.
For sure. One of the things I try to coach people on is, especially if it's somebody who doesn't like to cook. I enjoy cooking, um, but and I like to eat at home because I know what I'm eating and the quality of the
Yeah.
food. But if you don't like to eat at home, if you don't like to cook, and you have a very busy life, if I tell you, well, okay, but you need to cook all your meals, you need to meal prep, I'm going to lose you, right? You have to speak to the person from where they're at. And so one thing I like to recommend, just a really simple tip, is that if you look in your pantry, you look in your refrigerator, and I'm a big label reader, as I'm sure you are too, right? You're checking your labels all the time, and you see that this one food that you eat all the time is, oh my gosh, I didn't realize it had that much added sugar in it. Oh, it's made with seed oils, right? Don't worry about getting rid of everything at one time. But the next time you run out of that ingredient and you go to the store, read the labels or get like a Yucca app, right? You can get the Yucca app on your phone, and then just replace it with something that's a little bit more healthy, that's a little bit less damaging, and maybe is going to start making you feel better. And I think when we have those small wins, when we start, wow, I made that change, it starts to create that cycle of, oh, now I can do that with another food. Instead of me saying, clean out your whole kitchen, get rid of everything, it's just not realistic.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time when people come to people like us, it's because they've tried all those sweeping changes and they've not worked, or they've done that yo-yo dieting or all these things, and what they want is long-term change, which you just can't make by huge overhaul. It's got to be small, bit by bit.
Yes.
Otherwise it's not going to last. So talk to me a bit more about the Hashimoto's. I don't know loads about that.
So Hashimoto's is an autoimmune disorder where your body, because we know with autoimmune disorders, it's your body's attacking your own cells. Your body attacks the cells of your thyroid, and it causes, in most people, hypothyroidism. So basically, after 30 years of having a non-working thyroid, I basically don't have a thyroid. It's been covered up in fascia, right? It's just kind of shriveled up. But Western medicine, which I adhere to this, that you need to have a hormone replacement for that, because your thyroid, although it's a very small little gland, it affects almost every cell in your body because it sends out receptors to all these receptor cells that have to accept that information. And so your thyroid controls your body temperature, your heart rate, your blood pressure, your menstrual cycle. And so when it's out of whack, either working and producing too much thyroid hormone, that's called hyperthyroidism, or Graves' disease. And then there's hypothyroidism, which is usually tacked on to Hashimoto's. I used to always say when I was younger, if I had to have a disease, it's not a bad disease to have. But as you get older and you go through menopause, and your estrogen levels drop and things happen, you start to notice, oh, wow, my antibody numbers are higher than they used to be, or my TSH levels are too high. So I take an approach with Hashimoto's, just like I do with anytime a client comes to me with any disease, any disorder, or any desire to make a change, is that go to the cellular level. And I know that sounds sciencey, but our bodies are just a bunch of trillions of cells. And so our cells, if they're not happy, if they're not healthy, it's going to present itself in different ways in different parts of our body. And so with Hashimoto's, the best thing you can do is, now this is more of the functional medicine approach, is to avoid gluten. And you could actually do the autoimmune diet where you don't have dairy, no soy. Corn is actually aggravating. But again, just because you have a disorder, it doesn't mean that the same thing that works for you is going to work for somebody else who has that. But I do stick to a gluten-free diet. There's lots of different reasons for that, but gut health is the main thing, because Hashimoto's and other autoimmune diseases typically start in the gut. So if you've got, a leaky gut, gut permeability, dysbiosis, that can cause problems in other parts of the body.
Presumably you're more sensitive to that inflammatory stuff as well, so that even a little bit makes other things worse. So I know you do a lot of menopause stuff as well, so that's something that I guess I'm getting to that sort of perimenopause-y sort of stage, so I'm starting to look into all of that more. And actually something I find interesting about working with a lot of women is that they're not, I guess they're becoming more aware of it, but even pre that point a lot of people aren't very clued up on how to work within their cycle anyway, and kind of train or to the phases, so when they're more tired in their luteal phase to do a bit less, or things that require less recovery. And I find it amazing that lots of women can get to their 40s or 50s and still not know that, despite having been menstruating for maybe 30 years.
Well, and that's all kind of ties back to, I think, what you and I both kind of teach is getting to know your body, right? And there are a lot of people that they like to just, or they just don't have that intuition of their body, and it's hard to learn it, so we have to help them. But the one thing I would say about going through perimenopause, which could last like 10 years, and then menopause, which has gotten a lot of press lately, and I'm glad it has. But one thing that I talk a lot about is there is life beyond menopause. So menopause is basically like one day in your life. So you're in perimenopause, and then when you get through that year of not having your menstrual cycle anymore, bam, you're in menopause. Well, then what? So it goes back to what I said about Hashimoto's and what we were talking about earlier, is just treating your body like you love it more than anybody else, and giving it what it needs. And I know that sometimes I'll say things and it could sound a little woo-woo, but it's not. You've got to love yourself. You've got to listen to yourself. I say to clients all the time, you know your body better than any doctor, any therapist, any coach. So, I just love teaching people that, and especially women. I work with some men, but I work with a lot of women. And I'd say the average age of woman that I work with is like 62 years old. I have clients in their 40s. I have clients in their 90s. And nothing makes me happier than when I do my holistic program with them, where I teach them about exercise, nutrition, sleep, stress relief, a method that I teach called the MELT method, which I recommend all of your clients look into. And then, of course, the mindset, which is the coaching part. And when you have that holistic approach and you start caring for your body, I have a brand new client. We've only been working together for a week. I'm starting her out very slow. She doesn't want to get overwhelmed. I totally get that. And already she's reducing cravings. She's having better energy. Her body feels better, right? It's not going to show on the scale right away, but that's okay. And I think that's something that I like getting across to people, is the scale is not the ultimate number. No matter if you're in perimenopause, menopause, wherever you are, the scale only tells us so much.
Yeah, I think trying to get people to focus on how they feel is something that I'm big on, because I think it's something that people are often out of touch with because they're so focused on the scale or how they look. And actually, if you focus on how you feel, often those things follow. But also, if you're feeling better in yourself, you often worry about those things less, which makes it easier to do the things that help those things. Ironically.
Yes, exactly. Again, it's that cycle, right? It's just everything kind of is circular. And one of the things that I would recommend, like if your listeners are thinking like, oh, I don't know how to get started. It's overwhelming to think about, oh, I got to get an exercise program together. I got to get my nutrition down. I got to work on my sleep, blah, 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 blah. It's like, when does it stop? I would say pick one thing. And if you're looking for health, if you're looking for weight loss, if you're looking for hormonal balance, all of those things are going to be are going to benefit, I should say, from either changing your nutrition or moving your body more or working on your sleep hygiene, maybe trying to just get better sleep. And when I talk about stress management, sometimes it's just taking a deep breath.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we're just go, 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 and we don't take a deep breath. And just learning how to slow down a little bit, taking little breaks throughout the day to just breathe, easy things. And then when you incorporate that, then add something else.
Yeah, I think with exercise, I often work with people who really don't like exercise. I actually didn't discover that I enjoyed exercise until I was probably in my 30s, because I hated it at school. I found it really difficult. I did not enjoy team sports, and so it's only when I always liked walking, but it was only when I got to my 30s and I started running and I realised I actually really enjoy moving my body. And there's a lot of people who are similar, because I'm not good at ball sports, but I enjoy them. But so then at school, the focus is so much on competition and being the best that when you're bad at them, you're not necessarily encouraged to do it for enjoyment, or certainly not in the UK where I'm from. And and in America, it seems to me that a lot of people give up sport when they go to college. And so people don't know where to start. And actually I quite often just start with go for a walk. Like, if you don't know where to start, go for a walk, or put some music on while you're doing your housework and kind of get your heart rate up by dancing. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to go to a class, you don't have to be like dripping with sweat or sore afterwards. You can just, have a little dance in the house, go for a walk, go do like 5 squats while you're brushing your teeth. It doesn't have to be these huge, big changes that are like an hour in the gym with someone shouting at you, and I think that helping people understand that there's small things is just so helpful at the beginning.
I think so too. And I think if we're talking about a person who doesn't like exercise, there's been so much research over the last few years too that moving your body more frequently throughout the day for a health reason, to be healthier, is more beneficial than sitting at a desk all day and then going to the gym for 45 minutes and getting on an elliptical machine. So maybe, going for a walk with your dog for 10 minutes in the morning, and then going to work, and then on your lunch break, going outside and being in the sunshine and just moving for 5 or 10 minutes, and then coming back and finishing your day, and then taking a 10-minute walk after dinner. You've gotten 30 minutes of movement and you've spread it throughout the day. Are you going to run a marathon with that? No. But is that better than just sitting at your desk all day and not moving your body? And not just from a standpoint of your muscles, your bones, your cardiovascular system, but also from a standpoint of pain in your body. Because when we sit in constant positions, like we're sitting at the computer right now, it starts to hurt, especially as you get older. Your neck starts to hurt, or your low back starts to hurt. Your butt goes dead because you're sitting on the glute muscles, and so they're just kind of falling asleep. And we know that daily living causes dehydration in our connective tissue system. And I'm not going to get too sciencey, but most people nowadays know what fascia is. And the fascia is the tissue that's in and around your muscles. And moving that more frequently, because your lymph lives in your fascia, your sensory nerve endings live in your fascia. So just moving your body gets the pump going. If we're just sitting and sitting and sitting, everything's kind of just getting sticky and stiff. And then we stand up and we go, oh my gosh, my back hurts, or my hips are so tight, right? It's what I call pre-pain signals. And your body's telling you, pay attention. One thing I wanted to say, Ellie, is that when we were talking about eating and everybody being different and people liking different exercises, something I love to tell my clients, and I'd love to share with your community, is picture yourself as a beautiful science experiment. And pay attention. Pay attention to what happens to you. Because as human beings, if I do something, if you tell me as my health coach that I have to go and take all these added sugars out of my diet, but I'm still eating more of other foods, right? So I'm not really losing weight. And if I don't pay attention to the way my body feels, if I don't pay attention to my energy levels, if I don't pay attention to the way my skin looks, how I sleep, I'm going to say, Ellie, I didn't lose any weight. You told me to give up sugar and I didn't lose any weight. Okay, Maria, but how do you feel during the day? Because then you're not going to have those blood sugar spikes, right? So you're
Mm-hmm.
not going to be the highs and lows. You're going to have more consistent energy throughout the day. You might notice that you're, not a bear to deal with because you don't have low blood sugar. We call it in our family LBS, right? Um,
In my house, we just call it Ellie. My husband's always like, "Are you hungry or are you actually mad at me?" I'm like, "Let's have a snack." I think we're
So
probably
we
just hungry.
want, so we, the more we balance our blood sugars throughout the day, right? The more even our mood will be. Hopefully, it's the happy Ellie, not the angry Ellie.
Mostly.
But so that's something that I think we can all do for ourselves is just treat ourselves like a science experiment, assess how we feel, and give yourself time to try something new and know that it's not always going to be comfortable. But when we do things that aren't comfortable and we do things that are a little bit more challenging, we become a really cool person on the other end of that. And we might become a healthier person on the other end of that as well.
Yeah, and I also think, like, to add to that, I think a lot of people seem really worried about failure or failing when they come, and I try and encourage people to have the mindset that when things haven't worked, that's fine because that's more information, and you can think about why it didn't work and what might work instead, and trying to treat things instead of treating it like a failure, trying to treat that like data that you can work on, and then in the same way that when people do elimination diets, you're trying to figure out what's the issue. Whatever things you've tried that don't work, that's fine.
Yeah,
It's not positive or negative. It's like value foods.
absolutely.
It's neutral.
And think about like if you were doing something, if you were working on a project and you failed, you'd know, okay, I got to try something else. This didn't work. So, like you said, it's just good, valuable information.
Yeah, and because I think that's part of, especially in this, wellness area, there's so many different things to try that it can feel a bit overwhelming, and so, but not worrying so much about if something's not going to work the first time is quite a good start for people, I think, to try and just start figuring out those puzzle pieces.
I so agree. And because, like we said, everybody's so different, right? Like we know that what's going to work for you isn't going to work for me, and vice versa. And I think as we get older, we do start to realize that. As a younger person, though, in your 20s and 30s, if your girlfriend says, I did keto and I lost 30 pounds and now, I'm going to CrossFit and I did this and I did this, and she looks amazing in her bathing suit or her bikini. And then you try keto and you're like, oh my God, I can't do this. And you try to go to CrossFit and you're like, I hate this. You feel like a failure. You're like, well, why
Yeah.
did it work for her and it's not working for me? And it's like, well, that's not your thing. You got to find your thing. And it goes back to loving ourselves and being kind to ourselves instead of, I don't allow my clients to say, oh, that's my bad leg. I'm like, you don't have a bad leg.
Yeah.
You have a leg that needs a little more love, right? Like,
So I'll tell you, I had
don't call your body bad.
I had to do that. I had a ACL reconstruction a few years ago, and but before the operation, getting it scheduled in was a nightmare. So I couldn't wait there on one leg for nearly a year, and so it was like a withered. It was like the same width as my arm, my thigh by the end,
Yeah.
and so even now it's not as strong as the other one. But yeah, and I had to get out of the habit of calling it a bad leg. It was just my poor little withered leg that is recovering. But it's funny
doing
that
its best.
yes, and changing that mindset was really helpful when I was recovering, because I was not thinking it was something that couldn't do something. It was like that it needs to relearn how to do stuff, and that just that little shift made a lot of difference in how I approached the rehab.
For sure. For sure. Because again, going back to our motto, it's cyclical, right? Like then you think, oh, it needs more help, it needs more attention. So you do that. I remember telling clients too that you can't heal a body you hate. You can't heal
Yeah.
a body you don't love, right? So if you had surgery on your ACL and you're like, oh, this leg, it's giving me all this trouble. It's like, no, if you give it more love and attention and care, it's going to heal better. It's going to heal faster.
Yeah, so actually this is something I talk about a lot, because some of it's cultural. I'm British, but I'm living in America, and one of the ways that we joke that I'm becoming more American in my house is that I'm getting much better at being positive self-talk. But for me it feels so cringy, because it's really not British at all to be like, I'm the best at this. And so practicing that was so hard for me, but it is interesting that when you can do that, it does change your mindset. Instead of being like, I'm so bad at this, like, just, oh, I'm learning loads from doing this. And it's such a small change, but it completely changes how you approach things, because you're not being defeatist. But I think a lot of women struggle with that.
Well, and what we have to remember too, is that when your brain, the neuroplasticity happening in your brain, if you're constantly telling yourself, I can't do this, you're creating those neural pathways to be even stronger. Where when you go to the PT and you work on your leg, and then you say, okay, I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to give it some extra care, and I do that, and you start saying, wow, my leg is starting to feel better, it's getting stronger, and you keep telling yourself that, that's creating like that dopamine loop in your brain to help you want to keep moving in that direction. Right? So then it becomes like a self-fulfilling, I don't want to say prophecy, but the more care you give to yourself, the stronger the neuroplasticity in your brain happens, that loop, that you're just going to keep going with it. Like you said yourself, you didn't really think you cared about exercise, liked exercise too much, but now you do.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to help everybody with, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting, because I got into it purely from a mental health perspective, that I realised that it was really benefiting my mental health, and then the physical benefits were almost like a side benefit for me to start with. And now I like both, because I can see how it all works together. But I think, yeah, it's those finding the way in for yourself, and then what's the benefit it's bringing to me now, and then what could it bring if I carried on doing it tomorrow and the next day and the next day.
Sure. And what's most important to you at that moment, right? Like really knowing why you're doing what you're doing, so that when you wake up and the alarm goes off and you're like, oh, I don't feel like going to the gym. Well, why? Well, it's not that we want to go to the gym necessarily, but what do we want that's on the other end of the gym, right?
And so for me, because it's often a mental health benefit, the days when I don't want to go, that's like the most important days to go, because I get the most benefit out of it. Yeah.
For sure.
But not always. That's a hard lesson to learn. So I know you mentioned earlier about the melt, and you wanted to, I definitely love for you to talk a bit more about that.
For sure. And if anybody's interested, if it's okay, I will share my Instagram handle and people can reach out to me.
And I saw on your website you've got some great stuff about it as well. So I'll put that in the notes too.
And you know what I want to do for your listeners too, if it's okay, is if you want, I have a freebie that I pass out to people. You don't even have to subscribe or do anything, but if you follow me on Instagram, I'm at boundless_balance, and just message me Ellie, so then I'll know how we met. So follow me on Boundless Balance and then message me Ellie, and I'll send you my pantry audit. And I tell you in the audit that you don't have to clean everything out. I mean, it's great if you want to go and do a clean sweep of the kitchen. But if you just want an idea of what would it be like to put all this good food in my body and take out the garbage that's hurting my gut, hurting my body, hurting my brain even, then go ahead and message me and just tell me Ellie, and I'll send it to you. But the melt method, I'm happy to talk to you about that as well too. And we have melt instructors all over the world. There are melt method instructors in England, although you're here in the States with me now. But Sue Hitzman is the creator of the melt method, and she's a manual therapist. And it actually came about because she was looking for homework for her manual therapy clients. And so she ended up developing this method which deals with the connective tissue and the nervous system. And basically, it looks like foam rolling. We use these little specialty therapy balls. We use specific soft foam rollers. It looks like you're foam rolling, but you're not. We do barely any rolling. We use the balls and the rollers to give gentle compression to very specific areas, specific compression to mimic the hands of a manual therapist. And it doesn't take away from anything. It doesn't, like, I still go for craniosacral therapy. I had a bad bike crash. I'm a cyclist, and I had a bad bike crash in 2020. And craniosacral therapy helps me a lot. But every night, I do some of my melt stuff, and it keeps me going in between my craniosacral appointments. It's not exercise. And people say, well, I don't need that. My tissue's hydrated. I drink a lot of water. But if your tissue, if you think of the tissue in your body, this three-dimensional matrix, it's like a sponge. If you left your sponge on the kitchen counter and you and your hubby went away for 3 days and you came back home, it would be all dried up, right? And that's what can happen to the tissue in our body just from daily living. I said earlier, if you're sitting all day and you stand up and your hip hurts and then it goes away, that is dehydration in your tissue, and we call that pre-pain signals. But if you held that dried up sponge under a faucet and you didn't compress it, you just held it, the water would run right off the sponge, right? So if we're drinking tons of water, but we're not compressing our tissue, we're just going to tax our organs and pee out all of our nutrients. But when you hold that sponge and you squeeze it gently and you let the water run over it, it pops up. And then you squeeze, you hold your weight, it pops up. Now you can absorb the coffee that you spilled on the kitchen counter. And that's basically what we do with our tissue. And it helps you stay active, pain-free. I've worked with so many people. I've been teaching it since 2013, and it has changed the way I help people get out of pain and just live a more active, pain-free life. It's amazing.
So interesting. And does that help? Because I foam roll a little bit because I get really tight calves. But does that help with things like DOMS when people have been doing a lot of weights and that kind of thing?
Oh, for sure. It helps with everything because whether you're sitting still or walking around or doing a 5K or dancing, or you are dehydrating your tissue. It's just daily living. I look at it this way. Gravity's pulling you down to the earth, right?
Yeah.
So we decompress our joints, and we teach you different techniques to help get your neck to feel better, your low back to feel better. People who have like plantar fasciitis, carpal tunnel, trigger finger, all those things, they're all dehydration in the tissue. And can we swear? Can we say bad words on your podcast?
Yeah, of course you can. I'm British. I love,
So I have a joke. I don't know if I stole it from another melt instructor or not. But I say that your muscle is fascia's bitch. And the reason I say that is because it's funny, so it makes people remember. Your fascia it attaches you from skin to bone, right? Head to toe. So it's going from the bottom of that first layer of skin all the way through to your bone. And your muscles are living in the fascia. So if your fascia gets tight and stiff and sticky, your muscle can only move so much. And then it pulls your joints out of alignment. And the little communicators for your brain that communicate to your brain that live inside your joint now are all screwed up. So we get these compensating patterns. We try to get stronger and stronger, but we're getting stronger in our compensating patterns. And if you are a dancer and your calves are really tight, I would say I would melt my feet, I would melt my back of thigh, I'd melt my calves, I'd probably melt my inner thigh. I would do some 2-directional length moves. And then if you wanted to foam roll, because what is foam rolling? To me, it's more of like massage or myofascial.
Yeah, I mean, I use it to kind of loosen up, and then also now I do it when I run, when I get in, because it stops it getting so stiff. But that's interesting. Yeah, I'm definitely going to look into that more, because that's,
It's wonderful. It's life-changing. But that's where that was 13 years ago that Sue taught me that, because in melt, we assess our body, we melt, and we reassess. And I thought, well, if we're assessing ourselves to see what our body feels like before we melt, why shouldn't we assess our body before we eat something? Why shouldn't we assess our body before we get a good night's sleep? Why shouldn't we assess before we do a workout, right? Like, make yourself your own science experiment.
Yeah, I think that's such a great perspective, the science experiment thing. And when you have clients who struggle with that kind of thing, so who don't have very good awareness and struggle to notice those kind of things, what sort of things do you do to help them?
I repeat myself a lot. I've been told I can be pretty bossy. I think that I ask a lot of questions because, like we were saying earlier, everybody's different. And I know that if I talk to one client, she's going to do exactly what I recommend. She's going to do her homework all the time. She's going to talk to me on Voxer and say, oh, I ate this, I did this. And then I'm going to have that client that's going to ghost me and who's maybe not going to do the assessing or do the work. And so it's going to take a little bit more. So I guess to answer your question, I start thinking, what am I saying to her? How can I change the way I'm speaking so that she hears it differently? Because saying the same thing over and over again, you know that. It's like, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
If you have a husband, if you have children, right?
I have a toddler, so I repeat myself a lot at the moment.
Right. I have a granddaughter, and it's like yesterday we were playing with a ball and we were counting. She's 2.5. So I'd throw the ball. We're sitting on the floor. I throw the ball to her. I said 1. She throws it back 2, 3, 4, back and forth. Well, she missed it. She didn't catch it. And I said, go get it. And she goes, oh, I can't. I'm too tired. And I said, no, go get it. Because I don't give in for stuff like that.
Yeah.
And she's like, I'm too tired. I said, well, okay, I guess we won't play anymore. Well, instead of just keep telling her she had to do it, she goes, oh, I'll go get it. And then, so you just got to change what you're saying, right? You got to change your perspective. And hopefully that the more what I find is the longer people work with me and they feel the difference in their bodies, then they really start listening because they know it works.
Yeah, that's so interesting. Yes, I think I know that that's something that a lot of people struggle with is because you can ask them what they've done before, but they can't always tell you why it didn't work or what it actually felt like when it wasn't working. Because I guess a lot of people haven't thought about their body like that necessarily. So trying to figure out.
And also, like you said earlier, there can be shame when we don't achieve a goal, right? So, like, if you say to a client, well, what has been your struggle in the past? Well, then they're basically saying, like, what defeated them, right? What held them back. And the ego gets in the way a lot. And it's not that it's just human nature. It's just how we're wired. And I think that's one of the things I so love about health coaching is that when we give them a safe space and we're like, we're not judging, we're just trying to figure out how we can solve this puzzle. It's a puzzle. If you're doing a puzzle on your table and you put the wrong piece in, you don't ever not try another piece, right?
Yeah.
So it's just figuring out the pieces to the puzzle and letting people know that we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for progress. You've probably used that saying yourself, right? We're just looking for progress. One foot in front of the other, that's all.
Exactly. Oh, thank you so much. It's been super interesting. And then I know you already mentioned your Instagram. Where else can people find you if they're interested in?
So they can go to my website, which is just boundlessbalance.com. And I'm also on Facebook, and that is just Boundless Balance. I actually have a free
links to all of it.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd love to help people. I also have a free Facebook group called Losing Weight After 50. So they can always go in there and answer some questions and ask to apply into the group and just tell me they met us through your show.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put all the links to these in the notes for people as well. I know that it definitely comes up a lot, that sort of different change in how people need to do diet after menopause or during menopause because of the hormone shift. And that can often be quite shocking to people when something that's always worked for them suddenly stops working.
Exactly. Yeah. I, I don't understand. I'm going to the gym more and I'm eating less and I'm gaining weight.
Yeah, and it happens. I work a lot with postpartum, and it happens a lot then as well. Those big hormone changes, and then suddenly, what worked a year ago doesn't work anymore, and it can be quite distressing.
Yes. Yeah. We just have to remember not to be so hard on ourselves.
Yeah.
That's the trick too, Ellie, is not being hard on ourselves, but figuring out what didn't work and then changing the behavior, not just succumbing and saying, oh, then I'm just going to give up, right? It's no, how can I grow and learn from this? And that's how we become that person, right? I
Yeah.
always tell people, if you have this vision in mind of who you want to be, show up as her every day. So
Yeah, I love that.
what does she do? What is the woman you want to be, right? A lot of times it's people want to lose weight, right? They want to tone, they want to get stronger. Okay, so what does that woman have to do consistently to be that
Yeah.
woman? It doesn't happen in a week.
No, it doesn't. And that's the tricky bit, is trying to find the things that you can do every day, even if it's just for 10 minutes, and then you can build on it. But yeah, that's the hardest part to start, is the what first, and what can
Yes.
you actually do tomorrow.
Yes. Yeah.
And do it tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow.
Hence why we say pick one thing at a time, right? And just start
Yeah.
little by little baby steps.
Exactly. Thank you so much. This has been so great.
Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. Thank you for having me. It was an honor to be asked.
Welcome, and I hope your voice feels better.
Thank you. I'm getting better. I think the better I get, the worse I sound.